Hello everybody, welcome to today's show. My name is Spencer Walsh. We're back here today for an all-new news flash. Really do appreciate you guys joining us here today. On the show, we're going to give you the latest about drama inside the Congressional Progressive Caucus. An antitrust meeting turned fiery amid allegations of industry influence on certain representatives being thrown around. Also, new polls show that the race to replace Marcia Fudge in Ohio's 11th district is tightening up after an all-out assault on former Senator Nina Turner in that district by some of the most powerful people in the Democratic establishment. Meanwhile, I Alone Can Fix It is a book about Donald Trump's catastrophic final year, and we will go through a new excerpt on that for a little bit of fun to end the show. Yeah, we got a great show for you today. Thank you so much for joining us, but we are unfortunately starting the show with talk of Europe. Flooding all over the place, torrential rainfall going down, 100 or so dead, with the death toll there expected to rise, with flooding going on in Germany. Very, very disturbing situation there. As a few weeks ago we were talking about how the west of America was suffering from climate change in Canada. Now it is Europe's turn in the ringer, and it really seems like we're just going to be continuing to do these stories. They're going to be more and more common, and there's going to be more and more horrific events that happen, but we will just not really, it's just not really going to faze a lot of people unless it's happening to them, unless it's literally specifically directly on their doorstep. It's not really going to be the end-all be-all for a lot of people, because why would it be? Because you're out there, you're living your normal life, and there's no real mass action from any kind of government to take this seriously. So it does not seem it doesn't seem like a big deal until you are hit with it, and the people who are going to be hit with it are people first living in island nations, and they already have. Look what's happening kind of in the Southeast Asia, Bangladesh, just completely getting wasted by climate change and rising sea levels. Very, very disturbing and scary situation there. But let's get you caught up on what's going on in Germany right now and Belgium. So just scenes of devastation from the floods came from all around Western Europe here. New York Times reporting as the death toll passed 100 on Friday. Roads buckled and washed away. Cars piled on top of one another. Houses were inundated to the roof tiles. Frightened residents were being evacuated in the shovels of earth movers. So it was a really desperate situation that not a lot of people were prepared for, it seems like. Nowhere was affected more than Germany, where hundreds were still unaccounted for, and the death toll has reached 93 and was expected to rise as rescue workers combed through the debris. At least a dozen were reported dead in Belgium. On Friday, the rain was still falling as rescue workers scrambled to reach cut-off villages that are remote on the best of days. The heavy rains, coming after several of the driest years on record for much of Central Europe, had brought some of the most severe flooding in decades. Extreme downpours like the ones that occurred in Germany are among the most visible and damaging signs that climate change is a result of warming caused by greenhouse gas emissions. Studies have found that they are now occurring more frequently, and scientists point to a simple reason: a warmer atmosphere can hold more moisture, which creates extreme rainfall. So all these things, they can be directly tied back to climate change. Like we are seeing that, and all this stuff it's being proven. And yeah, warmer atmosphere, all the really devastating consequences it can lead to, with just the fact that more weather happening more often, not to let alone like really bad, dangerous weather, like increased acidification of the seas, acid rain, all that stuff like that, that the negative consequences that the climate change will just unleash, bad weather will unleash, but just having more weather is already proving a lot to handle for many, many parts of the country, and people literally are dying because of it. And the question is, like, how long is it going to take? What is the acceptable number? And I think really you can compare, I think, a lot of what's going to come down the road in terms of climate change and climate response to how most of the world dealt with COVID. And I think most the parts of the world that dealt with COVID better are probably going to be the same ones that are dealing with climate change better, because they are more serious about, maintaining and upholding a normal society and have the wherewithal, the political will in their countries to go around what is profitable in the short term, which so many countries do not have the ability to do. And many of them are the most powerful, most influential, and most, historically at least, emissive countries in the past when it comes to creating this crisis in the first place. I know people will say, the developing world is creating a lot of emissions. Like, the idea that anyone in the West would have the gall to criticize the developing world for trying to develop is insane, first of all. But it really does show you. I think that these people, they're not gonna have a lot of like in Vietnam, they had like 35, 40 COVID deaths for the whole crisis, and they don't have the same resources the United States does. Like, there are gonna be people, there are gonna be investments that are gonna be made. There's gonna be great technologies that's going to be utilized and improved and put out there. But I don't think a lot of countries are gonna have the political will to turn around and respond to this in the appropriate way. And it's going to be a lot, I think, like COVID, and in terms of getting this number, right? How much death is going to be acceptable? How much death can our culture, our society, and our people absorb before, really the wheels start falling off on just normal order here? Because there's going to be a lot of people that, like, there's going to be like 100 people died 2 weeks ago up in Canada with the heat wave, 100 people dying here due to climate change, in the due to the floods. Like, it's very, very disturbing. So studies have found that they're occurring for this simple reason here. In Central Europe, rescue efforts were hampered with electricity and communications networks were down. Roads and bridges were washed out, and the drinking water was scarce. The worst hit areas were these kind of thinly populated rural areas. In the city of Scheltheim, Switzerland, where a river burst its banks, residents recorded videos of cars being washed through the streets in a swirling flood of muddy water and debris. Germans struggled to grasp the scale of the calamity in their country. Chancellor Angela Merkel expressed her shock and solidarity from Washington, where she was visiting the White House. Politicians of all stripes called for a truce in the German election campaign, and the focus was on how to deal with a disaster that was growing by the hour, with thousands left homeless in addition to the missing. Maybe that'll be good for the, speaking of German elections going on over there, coming up very, very soon. There's a Green Chancellor candidate, be the first ever. Talk about political will. What better person? You got to think. I'm not too familiar with their policies, but the Green Party candidate probably would be the best person in this situation to come in and respond. And she might be boosted because she in April, May, and the spring was doing very, very well. Then she responded. She had a few bad blunders on the campaign trail, and is now holding second place to the kind of successor of Angela Merkel in her same party, which is the more right-wing party. But if you have a Green Party person, like, you gotta imagine this. You gotta imagine this kind of feels how the woman's name is Annalena Baerbock, the German chancellor candidate. You got to imagine, Republicans would say that a terrorist attack benefits them politically because national security, law and order, all that stuff. Well, a climate crisis a mass flooding event may actually benefit the Green candidate. Who knows? But talk about political will. It's going to be very important. In Belgium, we saw the Meuse River overflowing its banks, flooding the villages in the center of Liège, leaving thousands without power. The official death toll stands at 20 dead and 20 missing, authorities have said. We are still waiting for the final assessment, but these floods could have been the most disastrous that our country has ever known. This is Alexander De Croo, Belgium's prime minister, on Friday. Relatives of those missing grapple with the fear of the unknown. The authorities of the Ahrweiler district of Rhineland-Palatinate said on late Thursday that about 1,300 people remain unaccounted for in their region when the Ahr River swelled to an angry torrent late Wednesday, ripping through towns and villages that hugged its banks. So this is North Rhine-Westphalia region there, and the river just goes all through. This gets cities like Dusseldorf in there. So it is that region that is being hit, kind of where Netherlands, France, Belgium, and the kind of southwest part of Germany meet. We are in a little bit of trouble at this point. So Roger Luentz, Rhineland-Palatinate's interior minister, said he was unable to give an exact number for those missing in his state. So very, very bad and disturbing situation. Death toll passing 100 in Europe and is expected to go up. All right. In a minute, we'll talk about some drama in a closed-door Progressive Caucus meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to the Spencer Walsh Radio Network. I want to tell you a little bit about our lineup for this summer. We start off with Newsflash, all new, of course, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. You can't miss it. It's our flagship show to get caught up on everything happening in the world around you. But stick around for some history and some entertainment. Learn about all the things you never learned in history class every Thursday with Hidden History. And get ready for a fun night out or turn your living room into the club with uncultured live mixes every Saturday all summer long. The Spencer Walsh Radio Network is your home for summer sounds coming all season long. Every podcast is available everywhere, so you have no excuse not to listen. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have some special order Ryan Grimm Intercept Democratic Politics reporting drama here. I only read about, to be honest, I'm going to be fully up front and honest with everybody here. I only read probably about half of this article. So I'm familiar with a little bit of this. It's about antitrust drama. So it's interesting. It's always interesting to see. We are looking, we are looking very, very much we're looking at this, folks. We're looking at this, folks, very strongly. All right. Anyway, so this is Ryan Grimm here. A Congressional Progressive Caucus meeting on Tuesday broke out into a furious argument about the House's package of antitrust legislation pitting Zoe Lofgren of California, whose district encompasses a larger part of Silicon Valley, against the authors of a series of 6 bills moving through the chamber. So Congressional Progressive Caucus here. A little bit of context. We're seeing this antitrust legislation going past. Biden recently signed a pretty good executive order, but of course he needs to put the political will behind it to actually make it work. Silicon Valley representatives, there's 2 that I know of. It's Zoe Lofgren is one of them, and Ro Khanna is another one. Ro Khanna is significantly better on a lot of issues, but I think he can still be a little bit suspect when it comes to, we want to encourage business and investigation, that just unfettered, support startup culture at all costs. I think he falls a little bit too much into it, but again, he's from Silicon Valley. That's part of the culture there, and he is a great fighter for a lot of other good progressive issues. And again, doing it in Silicon Valley, which is pretty impressive. So they're passing these 6 bills here through this big Congressional Progressive Caucus, which is, I would say 75 to 65% not progressive. But like people here they're not supportive of Medicare for all, supporters of the Green New Deal, all that kind of stuff. I think they just have to pay a little fee, and then they get to put the CPC badge next to their names, which if they're in a kind of a Democratic safe seat, want to connect with the base, maybe with some higher career ambitions. Being the CPC is a pretty good place to be, even if you don't have to actually do anything or put your neck out and be progressive. We know how many progressives there are in Congress, and they're all in the CPC, but not all CPC people are truly in any way progressive, which is like the very low bar, because it could mean anything. But Zoe Lofgren is member of the CPC. So the argument began when she, one of the most senior Democrats on the House Judiciary Committee and an opponent of the legislation, noted that she had raised an extraordinary amount of money from Silicon Valley companies over the years, but because she ran in a safe blue district, she hadn't spent any of it on her own campaign since 1996 and instead distributed it widely to other campaigns. So pretty much saying that, hey, I'm already not looking too good here on Zoe, because pretty much what she is saying, hey, the money I raise from big business in my district goes to all of you. So don't be thinking about pissing these people off and actually holding them accountable and literally letting them blatantly create trusts and things like that. Raising corporate money and spreading it around the caucus is a common tactic deployed by members looking to grow their power, but it's a highly unusual thing to talk openly about the practice on a legislative caucus call. It was a pretty shocking thing to say, said one Democrat. The debate devolved into unusually personal terms. Sources present for the members-only call said Lofgren argued that the legislation wasn't just wrong-headed, but also poorly written, which is considered a cardinal dig on Capitol Hill. So you can be like, yeah, I disagree with you, and then the other rappers would be like, oh yeah, that's fine, but poorly written. That is war. That is war. You cannot call a bill poorly written on the Hill, I guess. But yeah, it's crazy stuff. But already, here I am on team David Cicilline, who we'll get to in a second. And he's not even a particularly progressive guy either. Like, anyway. So the debate devolved again under these unusually personal terms. Lofgren drops the hammer, calls it poorly written. Pretty devastating there. Lofgren said she hadn't had enough time to review the legislation sufficiently and knocked the unnecessary dead-of-night committee votes, arguing that the approaches the bills take won't accomplish what could be worthy goals while doing collateral damage to the economy. Pramila Jayapal of Washington, the chair of the CPC, eventually cut Lofgren off, noting that despite representing Seattle, the home of Amazon, she had in fact been willing to take on big tech. How about that, Pramila? Coming in off the top. Good job there, Pramila, with the exact right take on that, saying, oh, just because I have some rich techies in my district does not mean we can't pass a bill, getting mad at them. And guys, yeah, they paid for all your campaigns too. Like, this is absolutely insane. And again, one of the perfect examples that shows you so much of what's wrong with our politics. Like, this is the conversations in the halls of power after we are literally looking at probably one of the most vulture industries that just have sucked up everything. So probably one of the experts say is one of the most pure, clear, and obvious cases for antitrust legislation, and it's just kind of hanging out there right in front of you. You're Democratic all the way. What is the holdup? Again, it's not Republicans. They're not the ones holding this up in the situation. It is fully on the Democratic Party. I think that is so important to realize, and it's another one of these things that you have to consider all come election time. It's like people, on the soft left will try and convince people who are more hardcore left wing, which by using the argument, we can do some real work on holding big tech and holding the powerful accountable. It won't be everything you want, but it's going to be something. It's going to be good. It's going to be positive. It's going to be a step in the right direction. But we have people literally in deep blue districts who are too afraid to raise or trying to actively stop this legislation and trying to hold it up because the big tech doesn't even pay their bills, but she can't help but raise money from big tech and kind of leech off the corporate teat there, and also then go ahead and spread it to members in the other parts of the party, which is a very, very common thing to do if, of course, you want to buy some influence, make some friends, throw a couple $1,000 to your friend in a swing district who the leadership actually cares about, and then leadership will look more favorably on you. That's kind of how the game is played in the rotten world of House Democratic politics. This is not a really productive place. So then antitrust subcommittee chair here, David Cicilline of Rhode Island, the lead author of much of this legislation, was blunt in his response to Lofgren. Cicilline lost it, said one Democrat on the call. Just talking to Ryan Green, be like, yo, did you hear? Cicilline went crazy in the committee meeting. He lost it on Zoe. It was crazy, bro. It was crazy. So, and he brings up a good point there, because Lofgren goes off on the bill, calls everybody who wrote it stupid. You don't really care. It's wrongheaded, and it's also stupid. Really kind of a blunt way of putting it. But he said you may disagree with the bills. You may have other interests you're trying to protect. Very passive aggressive there. Love that there from Cicilline. You may have these other interests you're trying to protect. Yeah, we know. We see you, Zoe. Zoe should get a primary challenge. How about that? So she said, Yeah, so this is a full quote. You may disagree with the bills. You may have other interests you're trying to protect, but to suggest members of this subcommittee of the Judiciary Committee don't understand them, with all due respect, is deeply offensive, Cicilline said, according to multiple sources. Late last month, the Judiciary Committee, a subcommittee that handles antitrust policy, passed 6 bills in a marathon 29-hour session. They're aimed at reining in and breaking up big tech, and Lofgren emerged as the bill's most outspoken Democratic opponent. That the arguments made by Lofgren against legislation are the same made by those in big tech are not in dispute, but to question the motivation of those arguments or the link between those positions in campaign funds is considered wildly out of bounds on Capitol Hill. So if you're someone like Zoe Lofgren, she cannot get mad at David Cicilline because she brought up the campaign fund in the first place. She was like, yeah, hey, look, these guys pay all your bills. They fund your campaigns. And, I'm very close with them. I'm their conduit to you. So don't screw this up, guys. One of the members, Lofgren, was offended enough that she was considering organizing a letter of complaint from the California delegation to was House Speaker. One member. I read that completely wrong. I apologize. But this is a very important and key paragraph here from Ryan Grimm that really shows why he's the best reporter, I think, on this stuff, because he actually tells you what's going on in Democratic politics and analyzes it from a perspective that kind of acknowledges like that the whole system is really a joke. So he writes, but to question those that the arguments made by Lofgren against the legislation are the same made by those in big tech are not in dispute. But to question the motivation of those arguments or the link between those positions in campaign funds is considered widely out of bounds on Capitol Hill, something that is not supposed to be spoken out loud. One member said Lofgren was offended enough that she was considering organizing a letter of complaint from the California delegation to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Lofgren told The Intercept in a written statement, my effort during the CPC meeting was to address the defects in the bills as drafted. I was not given an opportunity to do so, nor were the critics permitted to speak. That's disappointing and not the way to make good policy. So she's not coming out denying it. She's not saying, oh, we got on fine. No, she's saying there was a real problem there, and that is interesting in and of himself. So Nadler, Nadler of New York, the Judiciary Committee chair, also spoke up against Lofgren, though some sources differ on how aggressive his rhetoric was. Some said he joined in the ad hominem attacks, while others said he merely stood for the committee process and the legislation, though he seemed to enjoy seeing his longtime rival shredded by other committee members. Nadler and Lofgren have a particularly contentious history. In 2017, the Judiciary Committee chair, John Conyers of Michigan, stepped down from Congress, and Nadler was in line to succeed him. But Lofgren challenged Nadler in what The Intercept described as the first battle of the anti-monopoly era. The article quoted antitrust attorney Jonathan Cantor saying, it certainly may raise questions to have someone from Silicon Valley in any position where one of the key responsibilities is to oversee the conduct of Silicon Valley. Partly, if not primarily as a result of those dynamics, Nadler beat her for the gavel, and the committee has been in aggressive pursuit of bipartisan antitrust legislation ever since. Probably one of the Biden administration's best bright spots is antitrust legislation. The committee embarked on a 2-year investigation of big tech, primarily overseen by Judiciary staffer Lena Khan, who is now in the Biden administration. Lofgren objected to the product of that investigation report, which recommended legislation to tackle big tech's runaway power. To be clear, Lena Khan, the person who wrote that report, is now, of course, in leading the Federal Trade Commission. Jonathan Cantor, the antitrust attorney mentioned in that Intercept article from back then, is rumored to be leading the choice to run the antitrust division at the Department of Justice. Very, very interesting stuff. We're following that story and all the dynamics in the Democratic Party for you. Here's another one. New polls show Democratic race to replace Fudge tightening in Ohio. This is in the Hill. Excuse me. A pair of new polls show the race to fill the vacancy left by a former representative, Marcia Fudge, in Ohio's 11th congressional district, has begun to tighten as Nina Turner's lead has narrowed ahead of next month's special election. So pretty much an internal poll released by the Chantel Brown, the establishment candidate, showed Brown begin to gain momentum, with her on 36% and Turner on 43%. Remember, the last poll was 50% to 15%. That was Turner's from a few months ago, with Turner up ahead. And another one from the Washington Free Beacon, I don't know about that one, shows them tied at 33%. So that poll was conducted by Target Point Consulting, a GOP public opinion market research firm, between July 8th to 10th among 300 likely Democratic primary voters. All right, so this all pretty much shows you that a lot of the stuff that has happened in the recent weeks, maybe with Clyburn's endorsement, maybe with huge amounts of money being spent there by the Democratic Majority for Israel PAC, which is pretty much the front group for anti-Bernie Sanders people, the anti-Bernie wing people in the Democratic Party, the Democratic right, as one could call it. They pretty much spend on everyone considered to be a threat to the establishment, and Israel or Palestine or whatever doesn't matter. Nina Turner has pretty much said nothing about Israel or Palestine her entire campaign. So that's pretty much the front group. But there is no denying the fact that Nina Turner is under pretty much an all-out assault right now from some of the biggest powers that be. And that is why I am certainly considering sending her a few bucks, because it would be very, very depressing to see her lose that seat, or lose the race to have that seat. She never really had it, but yeah, hopefully she can hold on there. We're going to be keeping a close eye on that one. That is an August 3rd primary there. That's obviously going to save Democratic seat, going to decide the general election. But yeah, it's very, very clear to see that there is a real all-out assault being waged by Clyburn, Hillary. You know, all Obama has to do, if he really wants to stay in this race, I don't even think about it, is get in there and endorse Shontel Brown, because he would be very, very popular there. Just, you know, a few states over there in Illinois, but I mean, he's Barack Obama. He's popular with especially black Democratic voters. He is very, very popular. And if Clyburn comes out to campaign, we'll see how that goes. AOC also coming out to campaign. It's going to be a real test, a real fight to see if Nina Turner can come and hold this one off. Because if she does, that is going to be a serious blow to the power of people like Clyburn, Clinton, and the big money, dark money spending apparatus that is the Democratic Majority for Israel PAC. All right, let's move on and head to our final story. A little bit of a fun book excerpt here from I Alone Can Fix It. This is from Carol Leonnig and Phil Rucker of the Washington Post. All right, let's get in the narrative here. Finally, Election Day had arrived. The morning of November 3rd, 2020, President Trump was upbeat. The mood in the West Wing was good. Some aides talked giddily of a landslide. I mean, for the other guy, I mean, how in the whole world could Donald Trump, just like looking at any polls, looking at any sense of what happened? The polls were 10 times closer in 2016. How could he possibly think he was going to win, or any aide objectively looking at the situation think that they're going to win in a landslide? I do not get it. Several women who worked in the White House arrived in red sweaters in a show of optimism, while some Secret Service agents on the president's detail sported red ties for the occasion. Trump's voice was hoarse from his mad dash of rallies, but he thought the exhausting final sprint had sealed the deal. He considered Joe Biden to be a lot of things, but a winner was most definitely not one of them. I can't lose to this effing guy, Trump told aides. And I mean, honestly, the fact that he lost is kind of embarrassing, because Trump, all the things he said about Trump, all the things Biden said about Trump being like in his mental state were clearly correct. Like, the guy didn't campaign, never left his basement, only like was in front of like a few people honking, and like the only reason that Biden won was because of Trump's manifest incompetence on so many issues. I think mostly throughout his entire term, but obviously especially on coronavirus, on racial justice, and all the issues that, you know, played such a big role in 2020. Around noon, his detail whisked Trump across the Potomac River to visit his campaign headquarters in Arlington, where Bill Stepien, the campaign manager, and his senior leadership briefed Trump from his conference room. Stepien outlined what to expect that night when polls closed in each battleground state, how quickly the vote should be tallied, and which states would probably have the first projected winners. He explained that because they have a huge number of mail-in ballots in many states, it may take long tonight for the votes to be counted. Patience was in order. Stepien explained to Trump that in many battleground states, the first votes to be recorded were expected to be in-person Election Day votes, which could lean for Trump, while mail-in votes, you know the deal. So this meant that the early vote totals could well show Trump ahead by solid margins. It's going to be good early, Stepien told the boss, but as he cautioned the president, those numbers would be incomplete and the margin would probably tighten later in the evening. Trump then stepped out of the conference room and the big open floor of the cubicles to bring a brief pep talk to some assembled staffers who greeted him with raucous applause. A pool of journalists stood nearby to cover his remarks, and a reporter asked whether he prepared an acceptance speech or concession speech to deliver that evening. No, I'm not thinking about concession or acceptance speech yet. Hopefully we'll be doing one of those two. And, winning is easy. Losing is never easy. Not for me, it's not. We are about to find out how easy that would be for the next few months. As Trump thought about winning or losing, the Pentagon brass would focus on keeping the peace. That morning, Defense Secretary Mark T. Esper, General Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who's now being shot to pieces on Fox News for saying he supported, Black Lives Matter, whatever. And other defense officials were briefed around security concerns across the nation. If Trump won, officials expected large crowds of protesters to assemble in Washington, perhaps as many as 10,000 or 15,000 people. Law enforcement officials were monitoring cities including Atlanta, Boston, Los Angeles, Norfolk, Virginia, Philadelphia, and San Diego. San Diego? What the hell? For likely protests. San Diego's old people, I don't know. San Diego, very, very weird. Meanwhile, White House cooks and ushers were busy preparing to receive hundreds of guests for an election night viewing party. Trump's original plan had been to stage his victory party at the Trump International Hotel a few blocks away on Pennsylvania Avenue, but the plan had been scotched days earlier as the president's wishes for a celebration and his luxury hotel room ran headlong into the district's public health regulations for coronavirus. No more than 50 people could gather at an indoor venue in the city. Trump's campaign and his White House political team had nearly 400 people they wanted to invite for election night, so they moved the party to the White House, which is on federal property and therefore not subject to local ordinances. The choice of the location broke with a solemn tradition of never using the White House for overt political purposes, a norm Trump had already tossed aside in August by delivering his RNC speech from the South Lawn. Trump had also used the White House to house his political operations, setting up 2 war rooms with computers, large-screen televisions, and other equipment where staffers would monitor election returns. The larger of the 2 war rooms was in government office space in the Eisenhower Executive Office Building, which is next to the West Wing and part of the White House campus, where roughly 60 staffers would have workstations from which to receive up-to-the-minute information from the battleground states and track these datas. This and other episodes we count in the book are based on hundreds of hours of interviews with more than 140 people, including the most senior administration officials, friends, and outside advisors to the 45th president. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, meanwhile, had been working towards this night for 4 years. For her, 2016 election had been a nightmare, and one she was not allowed to repeat. She was determined to not allow a repeat of in 2020. That night was like getting kicked in the back by a mule over and over again, she said in an interview. The California Democrat recalled thinking that night about Trump's surprise victory. It can't be true. It can't be happening to our country. Pelosi said, "You understand this is not a person of sound mind. You understand that. You know that. You know he's not of sound mind. When he first got elected, I was devastated because I thought Hillary Clinton was the best people prepared to be president. Better than her husband, better than Barack, better than George W. Bush. Maybe not better than George Herbert Walker Bush because he had been a vice president." Like this is literally how the Speaker of the House thinks about politics. Like directly how many years you've spent in government is how good you're going to be as a president. Like just such a basic political understanding. It's really, really surprising. Mitt Romney, he was less shocked by Trump's election. He had firsthand watched as the Republican Party was radicalized by the far right, but was just as determined to prevent a second Trump term. The senator from Utah said in an interview as he watched the election returns in California with his wife Ann, son Craig, and other family members, he felt a pit in his stomach. The early numbers looking surprisingly good for Trump. Biden was struggling in the quadrennial bellwether of Florida, even in Democrat-rich Miami-Dade County. "I think he's going to win," Romney recalled telling his family. "Those polls were way off. I think he's going to pull it out." At the White House, people liked what they were seeing. There was a party atmosphere. Staff hung out in West Wing offices, chatting at least until 9 p.m. National Security Council officials celebrated in the Roosevelt Room. White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows served beer and food in his corner office. Another group of aides lingered outside the White House. Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany's office, known as Upper Press. In the residence, scores of guests, cabinet secretaries, members of Congress, television stars, and other dignitaries were drinking and milling around, mostly without masks, save for Alex Azar, HHS Secretary, fittingly, who kept his on. After a few too many swings of wine and beer, some guests became rather animated as the night progressed. Upstairs in the first family's private quarters, Trump was glued to the television. He alternated between watching from his bedroom alone and from a family room with Melania, other family members, and some of the most trusted advisors, including Hope Hicks, Stepien, Meadows, Miller, Stephen Miller, Ronna McDaniel, the head of the RNC, were in the map room. Members of, I love how they name all the rooms, like the map room, the treaty room, the Lincoln bedroom. You know, they have such a name for every room in the White House. Very, very, very funny. Donald Trump Jr., Ivanka Trump, Kushner was obviously in the building, Laura Ingraham and Jeanine Pirro. They all turned to Matt Oskowski for updates, sometimes as often as every few minutes. The campaign's top data cruncher, Oskowski, sat in front of the computer and performed real-time analysis of precinct data to stay ahead of state calls and spot any trouble on the horizon. He liked what he saw early on. Florida offered good indicators. Trump was overperforming with blacks and Latinos, especially among the Cuban Americans in South Florida, and Miami-Dade was going gangbusters for Trump. And turnout among the president's base of rural whites was high. Meadow, meanwhile, paid close attention to the precinct terms out of North Carolina, which he had represented in Congress, and felt confident about Trump's chances there. And early on, returns out of Pennsylvania were encouraging. And I think this is really reminding me of how bad it felt, on election night, doing that show on air with everybody and thinking about, wow, like this is getting close. I think we're freaking screwed. Like this is really going to be it. But then, of course, things, they chilled out, like they calmed down, and we eventually got the fuller picture. But it really was clear, like 45,000 votes going a different way, and Trump would win the presidency. It is something that a lot of people don't realize, and I think really speaks to the failures of the Biden campaign. And really should make any Democratic stalwart a little bit nervous for 2020. All right, that's all we got for you guys today. We will be back with Uncultured either tonight or tomorrow night. Bennett will be joining us, Bennett Lax, and we'll see you then.